They say the White House was raised on pride and vision, but the soil tells another story. Beneath the rose bushes and manicured lawns lies a silence too heavy to name. Workers once heard cries rising from the ground at night, echoes that seemed to seep from the stones themselves. In the late 1700s, men came from plantations across the colonies, not as free builders, but as property. Bound by chains, they mixed lime with ash and blood, laying the foundation of a nation that promised liberty, but birthed it through bondage. Records would later vanish, burned or rewritten. But there are rumors that the first basement wasn't meant for storage, that beneath the president's house, narrow tunnels ran into the earth, lined with iron rings and shackles. And when the wind passes through certain vents, the walls hum faintly, like a chorus of whispers trying to remember their names. The garden above is always immaculate. No weed dares to grow where something was buried and forgotten by design. James Hoban, the Irish architect of the White House, was said to be haunted until his death. Those who met him in his later years recalled his trembling hands and refusal to discuss the foundation. The ground moved, he once muttered in confession, and it knew our sin. Some believed Hoban discovered what lay beneath, a hidden chamber commissioned by those who funded the project. The chamber's purpose was not political. It was ritualistic, a sealed vault of human cost meant to anchor the house with obedience. When lightning struck the White House roof in 1818, Hoban reportedly left his home barefoot, muttering that the chains had been woken. He died months later, eyes open, facing the east, the direction of the foundation's first stone. Even today, architects studying early plans note strange inconsistencies, spaces that exist on paper but nowhere in reality, rooms that should be there but aren't. In 1802, an anonymous clerk in the Department of War recorded a strange count: 132 unnamed workers lost to fever during White House construction. But no burial sites were ever found. Years later, a janitor discovered a box in the basement archives, labeled Census, Philadelphia to Federal City, 1792 to 1800. Inside were sheets blackened with mold and age. But one entry stood clear: property retained beneath the president's house. Purpose, servitude eternal. The clerk's handwriting trembled near the signature line. Instead of a name, there was a single drawn mark, a chain link, carefully inked. The documents vanished after that discovery. The janitor who found them disappeared 3 days later, last seen leaving a tavern muttering that the chains hum louder when the president speaks. For decades, the night staff at the White House were mostly black women, cleaners, maids, cooks. In the 1890s, some refused to work past midnight. They claimed the walls in the East Wing would sweat in summer, thick, dark stains that weren't water. One woman, Lila Carter, left a diary found only after her death in 1923. In her entries, she described hearing prayers under the floorboards, voices of children, singing hymns no one had ever heard. She wrote that she once followed the sound and found a bricked-up doorway behind the laundry chute. It was warm to the touch, pulsing like a heartbeat. No one believed her, but other workers began quitting without notice. Lila ended her diary with one line: "The house remembers who built it, and it calls them back every night." President Franklin Pierce was known for his melancholia. After his son's death, he claimed the White House itself breathed sorrow. He confided to his wife that every night, as he wrote by candlelight, he heard dragging, slow, metallic, from beneath the floor. When he ordered the basement searched, workers reported a strange patch of earth under the wine cellar that refused to be dug up. Their tools bent. The soil bled rust. Pierce ordered the chamber sealed permanently and forbade any mention of it. Yet, in his journal, one line remains: "They built this place to keep something in, not to keep others out." In 1863, during the Civil War, a small excavation was ordered beneath the White House to reinforce old supports. Workers reported finding what appeared to be a circular room, stone, narrow, and marked by scorched symbols along the walls. At its center stood a wooden cross, inverted and chained to the floor. No record mentions who ordered the structure or why. Soldiers filled it in with concrete within the hour, but one of them, a man named Amos Riley, wrote in a letter that it wasn't a chapel built for prayer, it was built for memory. He described carvings of bound figures with open mouths, like they were singing or screaming. A ring of candles lay melted into the floor, though no one had been inside for nearly 70 years. Riley disappeared before the letter could be sent home. His wife received an empty envelope. Inside was a fragment of concrete, stained dark red. During Theodore Roosevelt's 1902 renovation, architects again drew up detailed floor plans. Among them was a young assistant named Samuel Delver, who specialized in measuring subterranean spaces. He wrote that while surveying the basement, his measuring tape extended 3 feet further than the walls allowed. Something unseen, he wrote, is taking space that should not exist. Delver became obsessed with what he called shadow rooms. He would work alone, whispering into the walls, asking for names. Eventually, he was dismissed for erratic behavior. A week after his firing, his body was found near the Potomac, lungs full of brick dust, fingernails lined with white paint, the kind used on the White House walls. No one claimed his remains. On his last scrap of paper, he had drawn the floor plan again, but in the center, where the Oval Office should be, he had written just one word. Below. In 1910, a Catholic orphanage in Georgetown began reporting strange occurrences. The children spoke of a white house in their dreams, a place where men without names whispered from the walls. One nun kept records of their nightmares. Images of chains, a glowing seal, and a faceless man standing beneath pillars of marble. When she visited the White House for a charity event, she fainted upon entering the East Room. Days later, she was found in her quarters with her hands covered in white clay. On the wall above her bed was written, "They were taken to build his house. They still wait." The church quietly removed all records of the incident, but whispers persisted among Washington's clergy. Some said the orphanage was built using bricks from the original White House expansion, bricks that should have never been moved. In 1948, structural engineers declared the White House unsafe. President Truman ordered a full gutting and rebuilding from within. Crews tore up the floors, exposing the old stone foundations for the first time in over a century. Workers claimed to find rows of small iron rings embedded in the lowest beams, not for support, but restraint. Some rings still held fragments of cloth and bone. Truman himself inspected the area. That night, he wrote to his wife, "I sit here in this old house, and I can feel the ghosts walking up and down the halls, and even right here in the study." But one paragraph in the original letter, now missing from the public archive, reportedly ended with, "They told me not to open the last door. I did. God forgive me." The door was never photographed. Its existence remains classified. By 1951, a young archivist named Eleanor Price was tasked with cataloging every artifact unearthed during the renovation. Her notes were meticulous until the final entry. Found beneath foundation stone number 3. 6-inch fragment of human jawbone, with teeth filed flat. Surface marked with faint letters, appears to spell home. Eleanor never submitted the bone for testing. She vanished 2 days later, leaving her apartment locked from the inside. On her desk sat her final note. It was never meant to be built over. It was meant to be fed. The jawbone was lost. The archives list the entry as misplaced. But those who read her report say the handwriting at the end wasn't hers. In 1953, a maintenance worker named Harold Keene discovered a rectangular stone slab while clearing out an unused section of the sub-basement. It looked like marble but was heavier, warmer. When he wiped the dust away, letters appeared, not carved, but raised, like veins under skin. He brought it to the archivist's office upstairs. Hours later, the slab had gone cold, gray, featureless. No writing remained. Keene swore he saw words, a list of names, and a phrase in Latin, Domus ex catina. It means the house from chains. Keene resigned that same week, saying the stone had begun to hum at night. Others laughed, until they noticed the floorboards above that storage room never stayed level. Even now, when you walk through certain corridors, your footsteps sound different, as if hollow beneath. In the early 1960s, the White House hired a night custodian named Robert Lewis, a quiet man who worked the lower halls alone. One night, he radioed security in a panic, claiming he'd found a locked cellar door that wasn't there yesterday. When guards arrived, they found him staring at a blank wall. His flashlight lay beside him, battery melted. He never spoke again. Hospital notes described catatonia and repetitive tapping of fingers in groups of 6. Years later, a renovation map revealed that beneath the spot where he'd been found was an old bricked archway, sealed in the 1790s, marked on Hoban's original sketch with a single word, sanctum. No one has been allowed to excavate that area since. In 1974, amid national scandal, a recording surfaced of a private conversation inside the Oval Office. The voice, unmistakably presidential, spoke words never meant for the public. "You don't understand. It isn't the people watching us. It's the House. It's older than the Republic. It listens." The recording was buried in classified archives under domestic security concern. The audio file has a 17-second anomaly, a low, metallic dragging sound under the speech, almost rhythmic. Those who analyzed the file noted the pattern matched the exact spacing of a man walking in shackles. Shortly afterward, the president ordered the Oval Office carpet replaced. Twice. In 1986, a photographer was hired to capture structural charm for a national exhibition. One image, a shot of the Rose Garden at dusk, revealed a faint, repeated shape under infrared. Hundreds of circular impressions, evenly spaced, like manacles sunk into the soil. When developed, the negative cracked through the center. The darkroom assistant said she heard metal grinding while the image appeared. The photo was never printed for public release, but a copy supposedly hung in a restricted corridor for a single day before being removed. An anonymous note left in the photographer's apartment read, "There beneath every petal." In 1999, a young communications aide began keeping a dream journal. Her entries describe a recurring nightmare. She walks through endless marble corridors, barefoot, the walls whispering names she can't pronounce. When she looks down, her feet leave wet prints of red clay. Each morning, she'd wake with the taste of iron in her mouth. After 3 months, she asked to be transferred to a different agency. But before leaving, she gave her journal to a colleague with a warning. "Don't ever stay alone in the East Wing after dark. It hums. It wants you to listen." The colleague never opened the journal. She sealed it in a file cabinet in the basement archives, where, according to recent reports, it still vibrates slightly when the building is silent. In 2003, a small group of staffers received permission to film a behind-the-scenes history of the White House special. During an unsupervised moment, a cameraman opened a door marked electrical access only. The footage was never aired, but one still frame leaked online before being scrubbed. A long corridor of brick, narrowing into blackness, the floor scattered with rusted loops of iron. Those who viewed it described hearing low groaning beneath the audio, though no sound was recorded. The cameraman quit days later, saying, "It wasn't a hallway. It was a throat." The rest of the crew refused to discuss it. The footage remains sealed in the National Archives under Building Anomalies, 2003. In 2009, an archivist reviewing old blueprints found a page misfiled under Religious Property, 1794. It wasn't a blueprint, it was a ritual diagram. At the center, a structure shaped exactly like the White House. Around it, in Latin, were 13 inscriptions, one for each colony, each paired with a single phrase, "Labor Eternal." The notes suggested the foundation had been blessed, not by clergy, but by plantation owners, invoking a false sanctity meant to bind obedience into the stones themselves. The archivist wrote one memo before resigning. "The White House is not haunted. It is doing exactly what it was built to do." By 2015, security footage began showing strange visual distortions during state events, sudden light flares, shadow shapes forming behind portraits of the founders. One guard claimed the figures in the paintings seemed to watch him back, their eyes reflecting the faint shimmer of chains. Guests sometimes reported cold air rising from vents that no longer connect to any system. Tour guides speak of faint humming in the East Room, like distant singing, rhythmic, mournful. Every attempt to capture the sounds fails. The frequencies are always just below the human range, except for one pattern, repeating every night at 3:03 a.m. When slowed down, it forms a human phrase. "Remember us." In 2022, after sinkholes appeared near the Rose Garden, engineers uncovered an older foundation layer no one could identify. Beneath it lay a sealed stone door, perfectly preserved. The president was advised to delay public disclosure. Inside the chamber, archaeologists found 18 iron rings, each fused into the stone, and on the far wall, faint carvings. Domus ex catina. Labor eternal. But what chilled them most wasn't what they saw. It was what they heard. As their drills struck the final ring, the entire chamber exhaled, releasing air that smelled of salt and ash. The instruments recorded a sound, not mechanical, not geological, but human. A deep inhalation, as if something beneath had finally woken. The White House stands silent again. The sinkhole was refilled, the story buried in classified reports, and the public explanation rewritten as structural settling. But those who've walked the corridors late at night say the air feels heavier now, as though the building itself listens more closely. Some claim the floor occasionally trembles when the president speaks of unity. Others swear the chandeliers flicker in rhythm, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat. The past isn't gone. It was built over, brick by brick, body by body, name by name, until the nation's greatest symbol of freedom became its most sacred tomb. And when the wind passes through the rose garden, if you listen closely, you can still hear the whisper of chains. They were never freed. They were only buried.